Well, I never had a chance to know very much of my ancestors either. I can only remember seeing two of my aunts. And I can just dimly remember them having candies and making me guess which hand it was in or something like that, you know. And one was Aunt Annie. That was one of my mother's sisters. I used to remember the other one. But just can't think of what the other one. Aunt Annie, I always could remember her.
How far back can you remember as a boy?
As a boy?
Yeah.
Well, I can remember quite clearly back when I was 6 years old, because I spent Christmas Day with the measles that time. I was in bed. That's one I always do tell them that I can remember my 6th birthday. Christmas that was, I guess, my birthday. Yes, Christmas. And we never used to have any doctors come around, and wasn't depending on doctors or nurses. It was all home remedies and treatments, and my mother was pretty good at that. She had 5 and 1 brother ahead of me, you see. I was second to youngest. She had lots of experience. And you know, the camphor oil, I guess they could buy that, but those camphor balls that you could buy that was a good disinfectant, and I think they used to use them to inhale too. Maybe dissolve them. I don't remember what they put them through. But they had so many different remedies at that time, back in our grandparents' times, that they hadn't heard of any of the modern stuff now. No, nothing similar to it, I don't think. And I can remember when one time I was running downhill. I'd be about probably 7 or 8. I was already in school. And I think my kid brother had left a fork laying in the grass with the tines turned up and the handle downhill from the rest of it. And I was running down there and run that one of them tines into my foot, and he tripped me, and I went end over end, you know, and that old fork stuck in my foot.
Oh my goodness.
And you know that all that I can recall was my mother getting a heavy old wool sock and getting a can, about the size of a tobacco can, maybe a little taller, and put fire out of the stove, coals, and then put wool on that, and then hold my foot over that. That was one of the quickest healing remedies they seemed to have for an open wound at that time. Everybody knew about it, and they used to, for kids that got caught on a nail or got hurt, well, they'd smoke it with wool smoke. No time at all, well, there was not even a scar, you know.
Wow.
And so many other treatments they had. But gone and forgotten.
Yeah.
Where was your parents born at, Dick?
My dad was born in Michigan. My mother was born in England. But they originally, both families came from England.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where the name Dixon is English, you know. And I don't ever recall very many visitors or anybody coming from England to visit us at any time. It was just out of the question to travel that far for a good many years, you know.
So your mom would have been a girl when she moved to Canada?
Yeah.
Pretty young.
She would be pretty young, all right, because I think they lived on Ontario there for quite a while before she probably met with Dad, I don't know.
Where did they get married at?
I wouldn't know the name of the place. I have never heard that it was a big festival or anything like that. I don't suppose it was, but because all they knew was hard times.
Yeah.
And in Ontario, that's where they got married in Ontario?
Yeah, it would be in Ontario. Yeah, because he had come across into Ontario from Michigan, his folks.
And they were farmers?
Well, they was some of them settlers that moved, I think, away from the States shortly after the States got their independence from Canada, you see. That made a big difference with the British people was patriotic, you know, and Scotch and Irish and a lot of them, they wouldn't live under American rule. A lot of them moved, but at that time they was they was going through a depression and had been born in the depression and was in it for years and years afterwards. They never knew prosperity. My old folks, they never owned anything except the most necessary things and got along with candles and kerosene lamps and hand-turning separators for separating milk and everything the old style. And $25 a month, I suppose, was about the highest wage that my dad ever worked for a farmer or anybody in that part of Ontario. Whenever a young couple got married, well, they had a community effort and built them a house. As a rule, they'd have a work bee. Sometimes it was a log house. But if they happened to be able to get enough lumber for a frame house, where there'd be a work bee anyway, and they'd make sure it worked and happen on a place to live. You know, that was kind of custom.
And then your parents were married in Ontario and decided to move to Alberta, eh?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we was all born in Ontario. Even Bernard, my younger brother.
Oh, yeah.
I was 8 years old. I started school down there, you know, and I used to walk 2 miles and a half to school, they tell me, with my sisters when I first started school in Ontario. And when we had everything in the barn. They all had big barns down there, the people living on land. And lightning struck the barn one time and burned her down. We had 4 head of cows in there, and a Democrat and a buggy and 3 head of horses. And all the year's hay crop, and lightning struck the barn. And I can still remember standing in the upstairs window, me and my young sisters, and you couldn't put your hands on the pane of the glass for the heat. The barn was not too far from the house, and the heat came back that you couldn't hold your hand against them. And it had been a downpour of rain. It came with lightning, you see, and they were scooping up water in puddles and throwing it on a corn bin there close to the barn to save it was full of corn, and they did save it too. But they was scooping in water that had just fell in the low places with pails and throwing water on that, coming from both sides, and but everything in the barn went. So that's what caused my dad to decide to move to Alberta. Some people had come up here, some of his nephews, and he'd got a few chances to communicate and hear some of their, and they thought it was a way better country, easier to make a living in, and more of a future. And So I didn't know anything about it at the time, I was too young, but the next spring, my older brother took over and run the place, and my dad came up to Alberta to look around, and he come to that place called Gates Valley, there east of Red Deer, because he had some relations there. And he spent the summer there with a guy that turned out to be our close neighbor after. But he traded the place down there for a quarter of land, 2.5 miles from where we lived at east of Red Deer there, just 2.5 miles. That place had been owned by a fellow named George Smith, and he traded with Dad and moved down to Ontario.
Oh, is that right?
And then Dad bought, I thought that he bought CPR land close to the school there, and close to neighbor Billy Gerke that he worked for through the summer. And eventually had 3/4. Not all the time I was growing up, we were so close to the school, we used to run down for our lunch, you know, we never put up lunch, we'd run home for dinner and back to school again.
So how old was you when you moved out to Alberta? How old you have been then?
Well, I was 8.
You rode the train. Moved on the train then, eh?
That was in 1910. Oh yeah, we had quite a time. Dad came, he came back after he'd stayed up there and built a house. He came back in the fall, in November I guess it would be, and to get everything in order and get ready. He had already made a deal and traded the place, and the days of occupancy was coming up pretty soon. And he loaded all the equipment and stuff, and he came by the freight, and Mother had all us kids on her hands. Of course, then some of our sisters was young ladies too, and Grace and Amy. And, well, all of them didn't come. I shouldn't say all because it was 5 of us came. I guess it was. He had a slow trip too. I remember being in Winnipeg there waiting for just a long layovers waiting for trains to get on the right line, you know. I know we was in Toronto, and in Winnipeg, Calgary.
How many days did it take to make that trip?
Well, a good week. We was on the, maybe a little over, I'm sure it was a 7-day trip. I can remember we wasn't boarding at restaurants or anything like that. We was living on the, and that was one of them old-style trains that a Negro, what's his name, head, Porter, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
He used to make up the beds at night, and fold them up into seats in the daytime on those coaches, you know. And he got well acquainted with people that was traveling a long ways. That is on his.
Dick, he was traveling for a week.
We was eating lunches all the time. That you could get hot water for tea and coffee.
Yeah.
And I remember my mother at stopover, she'd send the girls to the store. You could buy, I think bread was 8 cents a loaf at that time.
Oh,
And everything in proportion, you know. You buy a little bit of fruit. And I don't recall just how many dishes we used for any other thing, cereal or anything, but...
Was there a place for your mother to cook on there?
No, we didn't cook anything.
No cooking.
No, they didn't cook anything. It was all lunches, it seems to be. And I can remember quite plainly when we got to Calgary, that was just a name to me then, we was anxious to send them home. We'd be always asking her, how much further? And she said, we've got to go up to a place called Red Deer, and that's a direct line from Calgary. So we got into Red Deer and we stayed overnight there, and in a hotel. And there was one of our neighbors from out by Delburn there had promised to be in there and meet the train, you see. Dad was still way behind with the settlers' effects.
Oh, yeah.
And so this was Brown's. You've met that Jack Brown, I think, from some.
I have, I know I have.
Well, it was
years
his
ago.
dad that was there waiting for us. He stayed in town overnight in Red Deer too, and the next morning he come to look my mother up, and so he had a team and wagon, and we was going to go from his place clear out. I mean, from Red Deer out to his place, and it was 25 miles or more, and it was in the fall. The road was froze up, the ground was frozen, and he had to hurry along, Simon jog along, and trot along, and I can remember how my sisters was laughing at my brother Bernard. He was a fat, cheap little guy, and jiggling along with his cheeks, jiggling along on the wagon on that road. But we thought it was a long, long old drive, when we finally got to that place. But we found out that they had 2 girls and 2 boys there. And so we soon got acquainted with them, but we stayed there for, I'd imagine, 4 or 5 days. And Dad had arrived, and he brought 3 head horses. And I guess he must have put a wagon together and brought a load, as far as I know, with him. And took it to where we was going to move in. And then
He'd built a house, you said, the summer before.
yeah, he had built a house close to the school, and then there was the school teacher. There was a Christian family that lived quite a ways from the school, and she was had got the teaching job there. Her name was Radcliffe, Jessie Radcliffe, and she wanted to move into that new house that my dad built. And she did move in and was living in there when we came. So we moved down to the other place 2.5 miles away. It was a log house, and there was a barn there and corrals and sheds and everything. And we moved in there, and we didn't attend school that winter at all. We didn't go too far. But that Jessie Radcliffe, we started in the spring, I think, to school. And she made different arrangements. Her folks had moved up, and so we was able to move into her own house there, go to school close. She was my teacher. I only went to 2 teachers in my life. And she taught me the first 4 years or so. And then there was the Second World War was on during the time that I was still going to school. And there was an English, everybody called her an old maid, I guess she was. And she had a sweetheart in the army. It was over across seas in the British active service in the First World War. And she used to want to get her daily Albertan every day. She was following the war just like she was running it. You'd have thought she was a general or something. Yeah, people used to laugh about that. She had to have her Albertan paper. Calgary Albertan was a daily paper, and was the only one at that time too.
Well, was there mail service at the end, or how would she get it?
No, she'd have to get it from Delburn. There was mail service already. Yeah, there was mail service, I think, daily. And, well, yes, I don't know now what year I think it was 1914 that the railroad went through Delburn.
Oh, yeah.
Well, this Jesse Radcliffe had been teaching quite a while before this other one come along, before the war broke out, because I probably started school in 1911, and the war broke out in 14, you see.
Was that the First World War? That'd be First World War.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It lasted from 14 till 18. And my brother, my older brother, he was married, and he had moved up from Cotton, Ontario, and moved in on one of my dad's places. And he was farming that, and he had a sale and joined up and went overseas in the war too.
Left his wife.
Warren, my brother. Yeah. But he came back safe and sound, and he never did come to Alberta after that. His wife had moved back to stay with her mother while he was overseas, and when he came back, he got a job from Ford's in Windsor, Ontario. And he stayed with that for years and years. And I think his wife passed away while he was living there. Then he moved down over to Vancouver to a sister-in-law that offered to take him in and look after him. And he lived with her. She was older than his wife had been, and they're just the two of them that lived in Vancouver there until when he passed away. They brought his body clear back to Chatham, Ontario, and buried it with his wife.
Was that a manufacturing plant that he worked with?
Yeah, Ford had a big plant in Windsor, Ontario. You see, just the Detroit River separates Detroit and Windsor.
Oh, yeah.
And he had a brother-in-law. His wife's brother was working in the Windsor plant too.
What was the First World War over, Dick?
Kaiser Bill. I couldn't give you a very clear understanding of just exactly what caused it. But I'll tell you, yes, I could too. It seemed like it was a put-up job, and there was an assassination made down in close to Turkey, over in that part of it. And used to be little Serbia and Turkey and some little countries in there, and close to Italy. And there was a murder, I guess, or assassination took place over there. And that's what started that war. And a lot of people, I don't suppose they knew any more about it than I did. They great to explain it and tell you all about it. They thought that Germany had hired this assassin to bump off somebody and then got blamed for it and declared war. And that's where there was little Belgium, you know, is right between France and Germany. And they were heavily populated, a small little country, but a heavy population. And when Kaiser Bill declared war on France, why, he just never, without ever notifying his neighbor or anything else, he started sending a big army right to Belgium. Well, man alive, that was something that they wouldn't stand for. And there was a war going the next day over that, and it was in harvest time. And Britain hurried up. She was allied with France, and she got a bunch of troops over there as quick as they could, and they got into Belgium to try and stop the invasion. And there was, I can remember the teacher reading it in books, that there was thousands of soldiers out in some of those heavy crops. And the Germans, they thought numbers was going to win the war, and they was marching in perfect order, and the big wide contingents, you know, and bands playing and all carrying their guns. And English boys was shooting from both sides right out of the crops and just mowing them down. And one remark from what they called them Tommies, the English boys,
Oh,
Tommies.
yeah.
One guy remarked to the other one, this is just like mowing hay. and they didn't even get to France. They stopped them. France never got invaded.
Yeah.
So the fight was in Belgium.
She got it, the last war she did, she got invaded by Hitler already, not Kaiser Bill. And the Kaiser Bill was related to the Queen of England, I'm quite sure, so distant relation. And yet Britain and Germany was at war there for 4 years. And the war was so different then, you know, they didn't have flights of planes like they do. They had those old-fashioned bombers, but they hadn't invented any bombs, I don't think. I think about all they did was fly low and use machine guns. And
Must have been quite the aircraft too then.
And my brother Warren was in what they called the sappers. Now, that don't mean a thing to people nowadays, but I'll tell you what they did, Jerry. They started tunneling from the homeland trench and tunnel underneath and try to blow the other trench up, where the trenches wasn't far apart from aerial photographs. And and the Germans were doing the same thing. They tunnel underground and keep carrying the dirt back, packing or passing from one to another. And my brother worked in that section of the army for a long time, what they call sappers.
Digging tunnels.
And at times they heard each other. If they were tunneling, they heard each other working. They was that close apart, and they used to blow each other up. You know, if they heard them. And you know, Britain was, she fought Hindus. India was a loyal colony of England, you know, and she still is part of England, the British kingdom. And the Hindus over there, there's millions of them. And they got a bunch of them over there. I don't know how many millions right away quick, but they was trained up and they brought them over there. And in this part of Flanders where the songs was written about, and it's a terrible low country and damp, wet climate in there where the Allied lines was mostly.
That was in Belgium?
That'd be in Flanders, I guess, or part of Belgium, and in there I never could be too sure. But there's an awful lot of mention of Flanders anyway.
Yeah, in Flanders
And
fields.
the climate didn't agree with these Hindus, and they began to get sick and some kind of foot trouble. But they said while they had them in there, some of those Hindus, they was army trained, and they was obeying military rules and commands and on drill and everything else. But some of them would sneak away at night and come back with a German's head.
Oh, boy.
And they never thought anything of it. It's just like cats going out to look for a mouse. They claimed the Canadian boys told quite a lot of them in that. But they had to send them back if they couldn't stand the climate. They was going to lose too many of them with sickness. And yeah, they said the guys could sneak out there in the dark and sneak up on sentinels that were standing quiet listening, you know. They'd sneak up and take the head off of him before he knew there was anybody around.
Oh, boy. Oh.
So what ended that war, Dick? Did they...
Oh, it was a defeat. The Allies defeated them, and to where Kaiser Bill knew there was nothing to do but surrender. He was going to lose his shirt tail.
He was a German leader.
Yeah, Kaiser Bill. How's your Wilhelmine? Come in.
Come on in.
Hi.
Hi.
Oh, whoops. Didn't know you had company.
That's okay.
Talking
Well, we got finished with the war. We got it over with, and so when your dad and everybody got settled in there, when they got over and you got moved into your new house, then you guys were able to go to school the next year and live close to the school, huh?
Yeah, we were living like close to the school.
In a one-room school.
Yeah, we didn't have to hurry. I always had chores to do in the mornings, and Bertha did too, and do up chores before breakfast, and grab our breakfast and run down to school. Lots of times be there within 2 or 3 minutes of the bell ringing, but it was a one-room school. The teacher used to come outside and ring the bell. Oh, we used to have lots of times playing football there sometimes, and baseball in the summertime too, and besides we was right by the creek. One of the old neighbors there had donated a little piece of land for the school once, so the road went around his place there and then bent and crossed the creek.
What did you folks do for water there, Dick, them days? You haul water from the creek for the house?
No, we had a good well, but the house was on the hill where I was running down and running into that fork, I was telling you about. But there was a good well just below there, among some willows, and real good water too.
A hand dug well?
Yeah, hand dug well. Yeah, my dad had dug that summer before. He didn't have to go deep. It was only about 8 feet down, I guess, to the water. Well, good difference. But we always had to haul water uphill for washing and everything else. Every bucket of water you hauled uphill.
Oh, boy.
It wasn't bad from the barn. It was over on the side hill more and lower. We had a bank barn, and it wasn't so far much of a drop to go to the well with the horses and stuff, but from the house it was. Yeah.
And your dad, he mostly kept stuff in the barn too? His livestock in the winter?
Well, we'd always keep some cows in there and a team of horses for sure. And yeah, we milked cows quite a bit. We used to ship cream. We take cream to Dublin. There was a creamery in Dublin then.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we used to separate milk, and most everybody else was doing the same thing. They depended on their little cream checks
Yeah.
because it was hard times.
Yeah.
And it wasn't nothing unusual to some guys were milking 8 or 9 cows, and some half dozen, just whatever they could afford, I guess.
And all the separating was done by hand, I guess.
Yeah, there was no power, no electric lights.
So what did the women, how did they mostly preserve the garden? I mean, they all had gardens, and they had to know how to preserve that to keep it over winter.
Well, they had outdoor cellars. A lot of them had outdoor cellars, dug in the side of the hill, and a good tight door, and it was frost-proof. And they canned a lot of stuff too. A certain amount of vegetables and rhubarb and wild fruit stuff. They had lots of sealers and canned quite a bit of stuff. I know my mother always did, and some of the neighbors. It's one thing, they preserved a lot of stuff that way.
Was there any wild game in that Delburn country when you was a boy?
Small game. There was lots of prairie chickens and partridge, and there was lots of ducks there in the early years. I can remember when we would sometimes come home from school and Dad and Mom wasn't around there, and next thing we find out they'd been over one of the neighbors there and all went duck hunting. Drive up around some sloughs, and you'd hear them banging away with shotguns, till sundown. Lots of shooting going on, and there used to be little ducks called peel.
Yeah,
You never hear of them anymore.
no,
And there's colored, nice, pretty colored little
Yeah.
things, like mallards. There's 2 or 3 tones, and they was the popular kind and as common as could be. But they say there is none anymore.
isn't that something?
Peel.
Yeah.
And they'd swim in a close knit bunch, you know, and the guys with a shotgun lots of times get 5 and 6 with one shell, you know, shotgun.
And did they salt their pork like when you butchered pork? Then how did they keep it? Like when they butchered pigs in the fall.
Well, now, I don't remember very much about that because my dad never butchered very many pigs that I know of at all. He would buy his meat. But I guess there was a locker in town later on, not in the very early days, but after Delaware built up a little, I guess they could keep meat in. Some of the guys that had some wild game or some, but I sure can't fill you in on that as to how they managed to keep the meat. There was very little butchering going on in them days, except by certain well-to-do people, maybe.
Dick, how far was the kind of the furthest distance that kids used to go to school? Like it have to be a school every so many miles, eh?
Well, I think that the school was probably 5 miles from down the Red Deer River. And there was a girl by the name of Alberta Russell that lived across the Red Deer River from where my dad traded for that place that had the building and all that. And she used to ride us. She was a real rough outdoor girl. And of course, boys, I remember that, Alberta Russell. But there was no school over where they was, I guess. And she used to ride a saddle horse 1.5 miles down to the river, and then get in a rowboat and row across and lead her horse behind the boat and anchor the boat and get on her horse and come to school. And she came and attended that school where I was there for the first year that I was attending. And she was, a lot of the kids, they figured she was too much of a tomboy, or she was a big girl. You know, she didn't get her schooling till she was well in her teens. But her folks had been one of the earliest pioneers that came up into that country where she lived. And her old mother used to tell a few of the neighbors things. They was up in there before the 1885 rebellion. And it was pretty dangerous for a while there when that rebellion was on. You know, that was a half-breed uprising. And a lot of Indians joined in.
Wow.
And Mrs. Russell used to tell different ones that she used to hide her old man in the cellar sometimes. And there'd be guys, Indians come around and they'd look around, where old Buck? They could only just talk a little English, you know. But she thought it was safer to have him out of sight. And her brothers was rough guys. They was just like this girl. They was raised rough and no schooling. They didn't mix with society. There's no dances or no outside entertainments or nothing to go to. And one there was a baseball player, Pete Russell. He was built like a grill. And yeah, they was quite a family. But we lived far enough from them that I didn't know too much about them when I was being young one.
But you didn't finish school, huh? Like you
No,
didn't go to
I
grade
sure
12.
didn't. A lot of kids would have been glad to finish the same time I did. No, I was going to school in grade 7, and right up just before examination time, I quit.
Oh, yeah.
And I'd been helping my dad that spring, and he thought he couldn't get along without me. So I quit and started helping him to get the crop in and work steady. And I used to be walking behind harrows about 10 hours a day. No harrow cart, you know. Very few people have a harrow cart. They walk behind about 4 sections of harrows with 3 horses on them. And walk up and down harrowing their land. And they used to harrow it lots because they believed in harrowing it a lot and making a good fine seed bed.
Oh, yeah.
You know, they was all mostly, a lot of them was Ontario farmers, and they were used to farming small acreages anyway, and they
Was that land cleared up when your dad bought it?
the what?
That land, was it in cultivation when your dad bought it? Or did he have to break some of
He
it?
had to break on the, there was a little small field on the place that he traded for,
Mhm.
but there wasn't an acre. No, he had to break every foot. Oh, he used to work out in the field till supper time and come in and have supper and go out and cut brush and burn piles and work till everybody in the country could see the lights, you know, of the fires around there. And he'd no limit to his day, and he was so anxious to get brush out of the way and get doing a little plowing, you know. And he did all about 3 horses and a little breaking plow. I can remember him giving a guy a job breaking for him one time, a fellow by the name of Jess Brink. Jess was wanting to get married, and he was trying to make some money. And the old man had a few dollars, I guess, that time, and decided to give him a contract to break for him. It was a piece that had a little pretty good sized timber on it, poplars. So there would be a few roots. That's the only time, up till Bernard took over, that, and then of course he started breaking with the tractor. But everybody's doing the same thing. There was some outfit, a prosperous, bigger outfit south of us there that got a big old tractor in there one time. One of them big old things with a hood over it, you know. I don't know what they called them. And they was pulling about 3 breakers, I think, behind that. And my dad and mother drove down there just to see that outfit work, to see how nice and straight their furrows was and everything, you know. They was breaking on the half section, I guess. And that was an outstanding event for them to see that outfit. They never thought that human beings would ever invent anything as big as that for farming, you know.
Well, did he grow grain to sell, or did he grow mostly just to feed his livestock?
No, he grew it to sell. He was raising wheat whenever he got started, and there was some good wheat crops in there and good oat crops. But he depended on wild hay, you know. I learned to sit on one of them old 5-foot mowers and mow hay because there was lots of open sloughs that other guys may have been haying on them years before, but they had got on their feet better, and yeah, there was lots of real good hay. It wasn't slough hay, but it was on nice little open low land and smooth. Lots of good hay. And we'd rake it and caulk it up by hand, you know. Very few people used the hay buck to swoop it in with 2 teams. That was quite a novelty when they started that.
So did he stack the hay in the barn?
Yeah, we'd build stacks right close to the barn. So
You told me about one guy one time that run out of hay in the spring. It was getting pretty low and he just carried the hay by and let the horses smell of it.
Oh, yeah, that was that was Billy Rickey. That's the guy my dad stayed with in the summer when he came up to look for land in the first place. And this Billy, his folks lived out by Red Deer and he had homesteaded there. He was quite a character and darn good scout. And his kids attended school, same school I did, and we was pretty close neighbors there. He married a girl by the name of Edith Little, and they had one child, I guess, when we moved up there. Yeah, he was a guy that, there was one spring, I think it was 1920, that there was a shortage of feed. Hay was selling down in Calgary for about $30 a ton or something, and that was fabulous, you know. And the only guy that had any was Pat Burns. He had a bunch of her stockpiled, and he wouldn't sell us in Calgary there. He had the stockyards and the big meat industry. But there was other people there that took a team and sleigh and went out and cut pussy willows on the willows. It was in this April, and the pussy willows was out, and they cut loads and loads of the tops of these pussy willows and haul them out and throw them out, and the cattle would eat them off the snow. We got a heavy snow right in the spring of the year. I had been helping our cousins, Harold Little, there to put in crop when this snow come.
Wow.
It was in May, is what it was, in May. And that's the time this Billy Rickey told somebody that he'd go up in the hay mound and get a little hay on a fork and shove her down and let everything have a good look at and then look back again. Yeah, that was a joke that was very cool. And another guy out in the foothills there, around Sundry, where there was guys out there that had quite a bunch of cattle. They got the deep snow. And one of them told me they just took the biggest, strongest old saddle horse they had and broke trail from one jack pine to another. Underneath the big jack pine there was a little bit of grass, and they just broke trail. The cattle were all strung out following, and some would pass on and go to the next tree, and they was turning their riding all day long to keep them alive.
Did you tell me that the place where you used to go to school, that they used it for a church then on Sunday? Was that the same building?
That was the old Gates Valley School, and they had services there as long as I lived around there. From the time we moved, there's a lot left. They were still holding Methodists. And the preacher at that time, he lived in Delburn, and it was about 4 miles for him to come out. He'd come out, team and cutter, or sometimes a single horse and a little cutter, and hold service there in the morning, and then come up to our place, or one of the neighbors. There was 3 of them that took turns, and he'd always welcome to come up for dinner, and have his team fed, his horse. Then he'd drive another 6 miles and have an afternoon service, and then drive into Delburn and have an evening service in his own church. He did that for every one of them that came along. They always took that same route, and that was their circuit. And they thought nothing of it. And they had to get around in pretty good time in the morning, regardless of the weather too. You know, there was always some that would come to the services, even if it was blizzarding, and they didn't want to disappoint them. They had no way to notify them, but like nowadays. But we got phones in there. I don't know what year it was. During the First World War, sometime in between 14 and 18. And then there was them old phones that you had to crank on the wall, and you could rubber in. and listen in on which one we're cutting on. So. Yeah, well,
Dick, what about you said there's some CPR land?
yeah.
It used to be there was some land out of every township that was set aside, and wasn't there? Four sections, wasn't there, in every township?
There was 1/4, I think.
Quarter?
There was Hudson Bay land. Seemed like when the Hudson Bay Company, they was a big outfit, and they had quite a claim on a lot of raw land when they settled up and made arrangements to. It was Hudson Bay land.
And I wonder, you think the mineral rights went with that Hudson Bay land? Would they have had mineral rights with that land?
I doubt if it'd go with it. I imagine if they discovered oil or something on, well, it'd be a separate thing you'd have to deal through them to get any revenue from it.
Seemed like I remember looking on a map and somebody was showing me of the land that was belonged to the Hudson Bay, like there was, in section 6 and section 11, and then there was another two on the top of it that was like on the top part of a map I was looking at.
Well, I guess if I could get some literature, I can soon find out about that back history of the CPR must have just been the Canadian Pacific Railroad, you know, when that first came in, it's all good for it. They had quite a bit of land too. But
What did the railroads, when you guys rode on the railroad coming over from Ontario, what was those steam engines fired with? Was it wood or coal or?
coal.
What's fed with coal?
Yeah, they'd have a big old coal bunker right behind the locomotive, you know. And the fireman, he had to shovel, spread some coal on the, just every little while. Wasn't there very many minutes between. And it was a special coal, of course. It wouldn't be lumpy, you know. It had been all refined so you could spread it. And I guess he had a trip on the door of the firebox, I imagine, that and when it opened, he could spread his coal and throw in about 2 shovelfuls, I guess, in just a few miles anyway.
Well, that's where they come from, that saying come from, a shovel on a little more coal.
Yeah.
That old song.
There used to be guys tell stories about hoboing that got a chance to shovel coal a little bit to pay their passage, you know. But they wasn't fire, and they'd shovel it down close to the fireman.
Oh, yeah.
So he didn't have support to go get. Yeah,
So there was a time back there when there was quite a bit of hoboing on the train, huh?
yeah. I guess there was always probably some.
Did you ever do that?
Never
You
did.
never did.
Except, well, I was a legal hobo. I hoboed all the way down to Ontario. But that was with that Bagley outfit from Red Deer, you see, in 1925. There was a Jew that used to be running concessions at all the rodeos and the big fairs. He's well known all over Alberta. He talked a guy at Red Deer there into taking a stampede outfit down to Ontario. He thought he'd take it down there where he could draw some big crowds. But then they jingled a little bit with all the Calgary committee there, because Calgary didn't want somebody going down there and taking a rodeo outfit down there. They figured it would interfere with the attendance, you see, coming from the east, like. So this Jew fellow, he talked right back. He lived 11 miles out of Red Deer, and it was the spring of 25, and this Jew told him all the good points of it, and they worked through the Kiwanis Club. The Kiwanis Club is a wealthy club, men's club. I never heard of them before, but they had a lot of money. And so he worked through the Kiwanis Club in Timmins, Ontario, this Jew did, and they was going to put up $3,000, and that was quite a bit at that time. That was just for expenses to get the outfit down there, just the railroad fare and all. So they were supposed to be down there by a certain date. So the next thing was Ray Bagley was, and he was in cahoots with Tom Waters from Innisfail, and he had always been taking horses around to the rodeos, and that's what they did all summer long, them guys, bucking horses. So Bagley, he was going to take down a mounts, and a bunch there, and he wanted some boys to go along, and there was 15 of us went down there, all told. And he was along too, of course. But there was 5 carloads of stock, and 5 passes is all they had. And the rest of us had to stay out of sight. Or else change off, you know, and turn about. And just as long as the breakage and some of the officials didn't see any more than 5 at a time.
Oh, yeah.
And we was a week going down there. We went by Saskatoon, and we was in Winnipeg for a while, and then down, went by North Bay. We went way up into northern, up to Timmins, if you see it on the map.
Oh, yeah.
It's way up in the gold mine country.
That's in Ontario, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
way in the north.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, we was a long time getting down there, and then we had to build everything. There was nothing down there for arena or shoots or pens or nothing. We had to be there in plenty of time and get busy. And we rented the lumber, they did, for what lumber we needed. They rented it for so much, $1,000, just for, of course, it depreciated by being nailed, you see, but we had to take them down, or I think they agreed to salvage them themselves, but they had to pay quite a rent to use it.
So you had to build the whole thing when you got there?
We did. There was nothing on the sports grounds when we got down there. We had to get busy, and they trucked the lumber out to us. That was understood, and we got busy, built the arena.
So there was no rodeos really happening before that?
No, there never had been. Oh, no. There hadn't been one in any of them places. We went from Timmins, we lived around there for 3 weeks. And I've still got some pictures from there. And then we took off. We had to ship out 80 miles on the railroad. Then we unloaded and drove all our stock for 3 days, I think it was. 3 nights we was on the road. We was taking them down to Cobalt. And so had to do the same thing. Well, they did have an arena fence there, and we just had to build some pens and chutes and fixed up a little there. And then from there we went down to Sturgeon Falls, was another place in Sudbury.
And there had never been a rodeo in Ontario at that time yet, you see?
No. Very few people down there had ever seen anything like that. The odd ones had been to Calgary or up to Regina or someplace and saw.
So were you 15? Were you the bronc riders and the horse riders and everything that was there?
No, we wasn't all the same. There was some we rode Rome standing riders. We had 3 of them in there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's right, 2 horses.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'd be quite.
And we
I've seen them do
we
that.
had the champion of Central Alberta along for bronc riding,
Well,
and there was quite a few of us that rode.
So Alberta was the first place that had rodeos in Canada, you think?
Alberta?
Yeah. Was it the first places that had rodeos?
I don't know about that. I've never. No, I hardly suppose. I imagine they had some in Saskatchewan maybe sooner in Alberta, but I don't know. All I know is that old Guy Weedy came up to Calgary. He come from Madison Square Garden, New York. And he flew into Calgary, and he was the right type to get out and try and start something big anyway, and he was a professional bronc rider himself and a rodeo man, the trick roper too. He'd been over Europe and all over. And he come into Calgary there. You must have read about the first time he arrived in Calgary there. There's some of them old roughnecks like Pat Burns and the old George Lane, and some of them, they had been big old ranchers, you know. Some of them had retired and was living in Calgary, and they still had their big holdings up in the country. And I can't remember the names of all of them, but they said old George Lane was sitting on the steps of the Alberta Hotel, and that was the only hotel in Calgary at the time, I guess. And he was sitting there whittling on a stick with his hat down over his eyes. And this here Guy Weedy had arrived, and he went and talked to a banker or two, and then he talked to some other people who was pretty well acquainted, and they gave him the names of the most likely ones that he could depend on to get $5,000 or so, or 25. And but anyway, this old guy, it's in some of the books where George Lane was sitting there alone, whittling on a stick, and looked up to see whose shadow he was seeing, and it was Guy Weedy. And he started talking with him and told him what he had in mind and outlined everything and how many people would come if Calgary had a good name and such a big surrounding of stock country and a lot of local competition, and he put up a good talk. Oh, Lane, he said, yeah, I'll think on it. But when they come to go into the bank to get the money, so to really get things rolling, they had three guys that had promised 25,000.
Is that right? And what year would that have been, Dick?
1919, I guess. I think that was the first big year.
And 3 guys come up with 25,000.
Yeah, and there were 2 more. This old George Lane was one of them, but there was one guy was away, and we gathered the other 4 and took them all into the bank at the same time, naturally, to make the agreement, because he had to have that money to get started to hire scouts to go out and find good horses and a lot of other things. One guy was away, and the banker said, you can't do business today, that guy hit back. I think it was old Ray Knight, the big Mormon from down south. But the other boys all said, oh, put him down for 25,000. And they did, without even being there. And that's a joke in the old annals of Calgary.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So they must have been quite the cattle operators already to have that kind of money at that time, eh?
Oh yeah, they've been making money and not spending on anything, I guess, and had a few good years, you know.
So that was the kind of the beginning of the Calgary Stampede.
Yeah,
And did
as
you,
far as I know. And
Did
boy,
you
did
ride?
they have a good one. It was, this guy had come from Madison Square Garden down there, and there was another guy, or several of them, and top-notch, world-famous guys came up to it too, you know, when they heard that Weedy had grounded and was going to go. There was a guy by the name of Pinky Gisk. I can remember, I went to that one. Me and old Slim Mills from down there went to the 1919 Stampede.
First one.
You know that all they had for an announcer was the big horn? Yes, he did all the announcing to the crowd in the grandstand with a big horn.
How many different events did they have that year?
Oh, there was a lot of professional stuff there. There was, although it goes all with Stampede, I guess. There was an awful lot of local bronc riders from BC, some of the best from some of the ranches over there, you know. And a lot of other guys that came there, they come there to try their luck. I guess the admission wasn't very high, the rate, you know. And they had lots of competition. But do you know that Weedick had sent out some scouts and they went out around over Drumheller way and into Saskatchewan and gathered up a lot of horses with reputations by local people, you know, good horses. They had lots of them there. And it was nothing to sit there in the grandstand and watch 5 and 6 guys all get bucked off, one after another, just as fast as they opened the chutes, boy.
Oh, boy. But did you ride in that one, Dad?
Huh?
Was you riding in that
No, I
one?
wasn't.
You
I was
didn't?
just
No.
a kid then.
Yeah.
You've been 17 then, huh?
Yeah, I was 17 that fall. And,
Yeah. So when did you start riding in rodeos?
well, I started just fooling around, just riding the odd pony once in a while, you know, and at a picnic or something.
Did you ever participate in the Calgary Stampede?
No,
No.
no, no.
They wouldn't have had chuck wagons yet at that time, did they? Did they have chuck wagon races?
No, I don't believe they had them there. That's one thing I think you mentioned, that I don't think they had them. I think they came in later. But,
But in those rodeos that you went over to Ontario with, did you get involved in riding in them?
yeah,
Yeah.
some.
And lots of local people there too?
Oh, they had some good crowds, you know, pretty good crowds.
Local cowboys would come and get
No locals down there,
No.
just our own bunch. There was a guy come along that had just come back from England and came there. He was a trick roper and a world famous guy too. He stopped with us for a while.
How many days would you have a rodeo in one place then?
I think it was 5 days, it seems to me.
Well, that'd be a big deal, huh?
I'm pretty sure that it was 5 days at Timmins. I think there's 3 days at Sudbury and some other.
Did that get to be a yearly thing after that?
I don't suppose so. I doubt if they ever did have. No, it's too far to. There's no. I don't think there'd be very much chance down there of any of that Western display.
So then, you said one year you went down to work with Henry Ford. What year, how old would you have been then?
That's before. It was after I was at the Calgary Stampede. It was in 19 I was at the Calgary Stampede, and it was 23 when I went down to this. Yeah, I was 21
Oh, yeah.
when I was in Detroit. Harold Little and my brother Bernard and I went together down there. And yeah, everything was booming down there, and we heard such. Well, my brother-in-law Lionel Lagenberger and my sister Amy, they had moved down there, and he got a job right away in the soldering department, soldering radiators, and he was making better money than he could have ever made. And at that time, why, Ford was having them come in by thousands from Australia and every island in the sea, and they was pouring in there from every place in Europe. The place where I was working, there was 55,000 men working in that place. Imagine that. I never thought I'd ever get into a place like that. And he had 3 plants in Detroit. That was the Highland Park plant. There was 55,000 men working in there, and then there was the River Rouge and the Lincoln. And the Lincoln had 26,000 working in it. It was the smallest one. And those guys pouring down there from Alberta and all over to and $5 a day was the starting wage. And you could work up, even if you stayed on the job. They give you 40 cents raise, or 40 cents raise. And, oh boy.
So you worked on the assembly line there? Did you? That's what you were doing, working on the assembly line, putting things together?
No, I wasn't. When I first, they give you, of course, when you're absolutely green, well, they've got jobs for you to start on. And I was at the receiving dock where they was bringing in raw material for axle shafts. And they was just straight shafts for a Model T Ford with no threads, no grooves on them or nothing. And truckloads of them were coming in and they was baled, all in bundles with hay wire. And you had to deliver them to the lathes, you see. And there was a lot of walking to it. You'd go out on the receiving dock there, pick them up and walk in and deliver to different machines that was working steady. And they was putting out, some of them probably, well, I really wouldn't know, but I do know that there was some putting out 500 an hour. But they was grinders. Lathes didn't put them out that fast. That was a more particular job and took longer. But there was me and another kid was keeping 11 machines supplied. And they had a rack built there that you just leave them in, you know, and right to where they could reach them just while they're operating. And then one day the old bossy put me on a different job again. He took me over and put me behind a grinder. And he told me, all he said was, just stand there and watch that fellow for a while. Well, I watched that fellow for a while, and I see what he was doing. You'd understand it, Jerry, because the groovers on the end of the shaft, they left fine little threads. And what this groover, or this here grinder was just to smooth them off. And
so it started not on the end of it, eh?
yeah, and you could do it fast, because just as fast as you could take one and put it in there, well, you was taking it out, and they just barely had to touch the grinder. And you had a gauge shaped, just once in a while stick on one to see whether you had taken too much or too little, you know. And, so I run that for a while, but I couldn't hack her. My one hand was just about, what, 500 an hour, you never rested your hands. They were up. And with one, they weigh approximately 4 pounds, I think. I guess it was. And you do 500 an hour. And there was a Greek guy that I watched. When I watched him, before he started work, he bound his muscles with tape. And I thought, man, that must be quite a job. I thought, I'm tough, I don't have to do that. But I found out well, then one day of course you got a tap with a certain milky fluid coming down all the time too, you know, where you're grinding, kind of an oily substance. And one day I jumped my finger against that darn grinder accidentally, and I knocked the end off my finger and my nail and hurt it. And I was trying to go along with that, and the guy come along and said, "You can't work like that. You take that and go down and get it dressed." So I went down, got it dressed, but I couldn't work with a bandaged finger either, so I quit that job.
Then you worked for Dodge some?
Yeah, while I was working for Ford, I think I was going down to a couple of times in between shift when I had a little time. And I remember, a bunch of us went down there, the morning that we went down to try to get into Forge. That would be Bernard and me and my cousin. And we went down early in the morning, and they lined you up two and two, and we was lined up for 3.5 blocks outside the employment office.
Mm-hmm.
And it was cold. It was 6 below that morning in the Great Lakes along Lake Michigan. And people was all going by with their ears covered up and blowing steam, and us guys standing up there because we thought we went down early, and yet we were 3.5 blocks from by the time we got a chance to line up. Talk about a rush to get jobs.
Yeah.
We finally, they'd open the door and they'd let them file in, just like winding up a big strap, and right up to the center, and when she's full, well, they shut the door. You would see it. And then there was 2 offices that was hiring, and they'd, and some of the time, they'd say, "Where'd you work last?" "For Dodges." "Go back and work for Dodges some more."
Really?
Yeah, something like that. They was so darn touchy. They didn't need only maybe 500, and here was going to be 1,000 or so waiting up.
Yeah.
And so they knew they knew they had their orders for so many to hire that had quit.
Yeah.
And they had the darndest excuses, you know. "Let's see your hands. Where'd you work last?" Questions like that.
Yeah.
And every little while, just to break the monotony, they'd hire a guy. They probably didn't like his appearance any more than they did the last one or nothing. They'd hire him, and they'd say, "Go over to that." Go to another desk, and you're starting then to get through the process to get hired. But now they were just out this way, out this way, out this way, and you was free to go to the rest all over.
So did you get hired the first day there?
No, heck, no, I got turned down, I think it was 3 times. We was determined, and the same with Harold Little there, he got turned down, and Bun all at the same time, and different times. Well, then one of them got a job, but we wanted work, and we was going to stay with my sister and brother-in-law, and we didn't have very much money left, and we wanted a job. So when we got turned out there, why we'd go to a different, and they was taking them all day long. Maybe the employment office would be open, and I got a job in Pages, the first place. I never heard of them before. They're body.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah, and they was a nice bunch in there. They didn't ask you no questions or anything. You know, they might ask you a few questions, but he asked you where you're from or something like that. But they didn't pay as much as for it. That's why guys wouldn't stay. And they didn't pay quite as much, but I worked for them, and I moved into a boarding house so it was close by, and I could stay with Amy, my sister, and longer. And then every little while I'd go down and try Old Ford again. Finally I got one morning, I was quite a line up there too, but I got the job.
Was there a lot of people quitting every day, Dick, or why was it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, I guess there was. You just had to take somebody's word for it. You couldn't tell what was going on in the road.
Yeah,
You know?
live,
But a lot of guys that had been in, worked for Ford for a long time, they
Man, that many people, that'd be quite a workforce.
Yeah.
right. Well, I'll tell you, one time, they put me working with that was after I delivered stuff to the lathes. Then he changed me, the boss did, and put me with an old fellow that was running a bandsaw, and he was doing some precise cuts and on parts for bodies, you know, woodwork, hardwood for the Model T. taking the finished product and racking them up on trucks so somebody could take them. And but one time we were short of trucks, and he sent me and another kid up to get some trucks, and we seemed like we had to go up on the 3rd floor, I think it was, and that's where the assembly line was. And we got a chance to watch that assembly line where they're putting out 6,500 Ford cars a day. Would you ever believe that?
6,500.
6,500 a day.
Model Ts.
And those men working out there on fastening them down on flat cars both ways, you know, and they're going to China. He's shipping car loads of them to China.
Really?
And you know, you could buy one of them for $235.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Isn't that something? My goodness.
And Ford made you a deal if he hired you and you was one of his employees. Why he'd give you a little literature once in a while to encourage you to put your money in his bank. You paid 16%.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Must be your phone.
Well, that must be your phone, Dad. Might as well answer it.
Hello? That is me. Oh, yes.
Well, you betcha. Yeah.
I didn't think it would be. Well, just keep it shut off for a while now.
Okay.
Information on that's for sure, Jerry. It's too far back. But I do recall the days I was in Detroit and when I went to Ontario that time. And some other events, but
You told me when you got ready to come home from there that you had a good way figured out that got you home.
yeah, I can tell you all about that. You see, my dad and a neighbor of his had gone down visiting around in Windsor, Ontario, and in Detroit, down there. And they got smartened up down there that you could go to the Canadian Immigration Office, and it's across in the U.S. side, and they're anxious to lure people to come up and settle up the Canadian West, you know. And so my sisters had that all figured out, and my brother-in-law and one of my older sisters took me down there. I walked in there, and I had to pretend that I was an American. I was anxious to get up into Canada, you see.
Oh.
So this was a nice lady clerk in there, and she had all kinds of flowers and green and everything, you know, and vegetables and pictures and everything to show people what's raised up in this country. So I told her, yes, I was kind of considering coming up. And she says, where did your folks move from? And I said, well, just a minute. It's funny, I can't think of that name. I've always had it on the end of my tongue. It's in Montana. And she said, then where are they? And I said, they're up not too far from Red Deer, Alberta. Oh, that's a beautiful area in there. That's a wonderful neighborhood in there. They raise such gorgeous crops, and the climate is and everything, you know. She started to build it up, and I think I told her that I had been Kalispell's where I told her it's from. Kalispell, Montana.
So how much did it cost you to come up here? That was on the train, huh?
$25 and a quarter. And it cost me $26.40 to go down there.
Oh.
I borrowed the money from my mom when I went down there. So this, right away, was she going to fix me up? And she wanted, of course, I had to give her the address of my folks where they'd settled up there by Red Deer, a place called Delford. And so, and she gave me a little slip, and all I had to do was take it across the river to the Canadian authorities over there and verify myself and get weighed and description of myself, and they furnish you your ticket and you're all set. So that was that. And all the time that was going on, my brother-in-law Dick Hunwick and my sister Flora, they was waiting up. That didn't take long until I was in the out again, you know.
Yeah.
And the next morning, well, they drove me down. That's where I saw them last, way back in 23. Yeah, there was another kid on the train when our train got made up and ready to pull out of Windsor. And he saw, when the conductor come round, he saw the length of my ticket. And he had a long ticket. And he took notice, and he says, well, where in the heck are you going with that? I said, I'm going to the end of the world. He says, I'm going pretty near that far. He was going to Lashburn, Saskatchewan.
Oh, yeah.
Is where he was coming, and
Yeah.
and he told him I was coming up by Red Deer. So we got well acquainted and traveled together quite a bit and visited quite a bit. He was a nice kid. He was coming up for harvest in Saskatchewan.
So after you grew up in Red Deer, what made you decide to go north?
Well, I sometimes wonder at that myself, you know. It seemed like all my life, the stories I'd read and the ones I appreciated had a lot to do with us. I always did like to read early history and Western stuff, you know, some of the old pioneers, and my mother sent and got me a book in Eaton's catalog one time. I guess I wouldn't be more than maybe 8 years old at the time, or 9. And it was the history of our Wild West, and it was a big, thick book. And it was dated, it started way back in Daniel Boone's time, and Buffalo Bill, Cody, and all of them, and right up through to pretty near modern times, you know. But it specialized in dealing with the uprisings and war and rough stuff, you know. And that had a lot to do with, I guess, it to form my opinion, and I always had a notion that it must be nice to, there was native kids around Delburn there was quite a few of them, and I used to associate with them quite a bit and play pool with them when I started to play pool, and got acquainted with them a lot, and I always kind of admired the way them folks got by, it seemed to me. And them kids that didn't know anything about trapping, it wasn't because they had a lot of experience that way around here, they didn't even know anything about it. But as I got older, I got reading some other stories, and I always had a kind of longing to think what a happy, free life it must be to be a trapper and live in the wilds, back in God's country, away from the hustle and bustle, and not care whether they get a crop or not, or what kind of roads they got, or anything else, you know. Stuff like that would be out. And so that grew in me, and I didn't realize it. It was growing and getting deeper embedded all the time in my daily life and in my intentions, and it just seemed like all the rambling I didn't amount to nothing until I thought at one time, me and a couple of other kids thought we was going to ride clear down to Wyoming.
Oh.
And that's when I told you when he was coming up, that Moran, what is that place just north of Lacombe there? As I mentioned, Morningside.
Okay.
I rode from there all the way down to darn near to the border that time, you know, at Warner. And I worked for some guys that spring from just north of Warner there, south of Oakham. And but then I rode all the way back alone. My mother kids, they was going to go on alone, and they chickened out and they got home as fast as they could. There was 4 of us went down. Marlon Alexander, Bertha's husband, he was one of them. He was with me, and him and I worked together down, not together, but close together there, down in Warner. And, but then after that, that same summer, I rode up to Banff and was around Banff and came back to Bowden, and I worked around Bowden there, and I wintered around Bowden. And still I always had the longing to go north, and I came up here all alone, and nobody would come with me. When I did come, I left down there on the 9th of January, and arrived in Grand Prairie on the 11th of January, 1927. And I didn't have any money to speak of. And it's lucky, you know, I was around town a day or two, and I happened to get talking with a guy in the pool hall, and I think he heard me telling somebody else maybe that I was from Delburn, I ain't sure, but anyway, he came over and he says, "You acquainted around Delburn?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "I got a brother living down there, Bob Campbell." "Oh, sure, I've heard of Bob Campbell, he lived west of Delburn." Well, this was old Bill Campbell, and he needed somebody to help him put up ice at Flying Shot Lake, 5 miles out of Grand Prairie there. He was just getting ready, him and his partner, to start harvest ice for the restaurants, and they also had 2 big sheds that they stored ice in and delivered ice in the summer on the water tanks, you see, all summer. They put up some custom packing, and mainly it was for themselves. So that's how come I went out with old Bill, and he taught me how to cut ice with a ice saw, and you make the strikeout with a team. You shovel all the snow back with presidents, you know, and clean your back, and then you drive. You put 2 little pins in the ice, and you drive straight from one to the other with that ice plow, and it's kind of a rounded blade, and it cuts a groove probably that deep. And then there's a little flange on it that you throw over, and it flip it over, and it follows in that. And then you're making your second strikeout, and you've got that for a gauge, and then you just go through them 2 or 3 times and keep working them over. And there's very little sawing to do after that, and you just use a spud bar, and you cut them so far down, and if they're on the outside, well, they break off, you know, and you put up. And they weighed 400 pounds apiece.
What size of blocks would they have been then?
28 inches thick, and I guess they'd be about 24 inches square on top, I think. Yeah, they was 28 inches thick.
You haul them out on sleigh?
5 to a ton is what they was putting them up at.
You haul them out on a sleigh then?
Yeah.
Team and sleigh?
Oh yeah, we drive out there with.
Then you decided to go on your own, cutting on your own for a little while, eh?
Yeah, I did afterwards. Another guy and I bought a saw and went out. We used to walk out to work out there, but we didn't. We just sawed for a couple of guys, farmers, or not farmers, individual separate guys, independent sellers that we sawed some ice for them. They hauled.
So then did you stay in the Peace River country then?
Yeah, I stayed except I went back once and I worked at Three Hills one spring. That was the spring of 1929. I was up here all 27 and over the winter and all 28 when I went down. Me and another guy stayed with the folks for a little while in Oh, what's your problems? Shuffleboard?
Yes?
Well, count me out this time, Sonia. I got company and some other time. Yeah, that old lady, he was gonna come over and I visited him last night and he made me over. But yeah, I wasn't down there very long. I just worked at Three Hills that spring and came back up here in the 1st of July, I guess it was, and I've been here ever since. Outside a few trips.
When did you come into the Fairview area? Waterhole.
Well, I went to Grand Prairie when I first came up, and I was around there. I hadn't even seen the Peace River yet because we went across from Drewville, you know, and through the Smoky there. And that summer, of course, after I had been around Grand Prairie, and I bought a couple of ponies, and another kid there wanted to go with me, and we went up to Scoopy. And I went up to Rio Grande first. There was a little rodeo up there, and I made $15 out there, and then we went up past Height. And we went up to Dawson Creek. I'd heard so much about Dawson Creek and Scoopy, and we went up there. And
Was it a pretty good trail when you to go across the country on then?
they had a good road up there then. Trucks was trucking stuff up. Oh yeah, there's good roads all the way to Dawson Creek and from Scoopy.
Well, they wouldn't have been the very big places at them time yet, huh?
Heck no. No, they sure wasn't. Dawson Creek, there wasn't hardly nothing there. Only I guess there was a hotel and a store and a garage and 2 or 3 houses. And not much.
So that would have been in 28?
But she sure built up after that. Boy, Gully was back there again in 29, and there was a pool hall and a theater and quite a lot of other buildings and place built up.
Was that kind of the end of the road, Dick, at that time, Dawson Creek? As far as going north?
Well, there was a lot of traffic going on out towards Arras, out west. Quite a bit of it going out, and some guys was living away back out there, way on beyond. I was, the spring of 28, I wintered in 27 up at south of Manning there at, I don't know what the name of the post was, just south of North Star, a little ways. And I stayed there and kept a little feed there and was putting up teams for the winter some of the time. But I had to buy hay and a lot of profit was for getting it hauled. And anyway, I stayed there till spring come. And I came down around Waterhole. And I had never seen Peace River yet. I saw Whitelaw and blue sky, whirlwind.
So when you crossed the Peace River, like when you did cross it, there had to be a ferry.
Well, it came up in the fall of 27 to Waterhole. Yeah, after being over in BC and coming back to Grand Prairie, then I did cross up there.
What kind of a thing did they have going to cross the river with then?
Well, they had an old ferry. Old Herb Foster's old dad was running that ferry. And he had a boy on there with him all the time. And they was an old family that lived just north of just north of the crossing up on the hill there. Yeah, it was not a motor. The current took it across. He just changed the angle of it, you know.
Oh yeah.
Winding on a cable. And it was an overhead cable, of course. And it wasn't very fast, but you go back, there's lots of traffic. Cars coming from Grand Prairie and different guys that had business to attend to in Spirit River. Waterhole was a pretty good little town then too, you
So
know.
what was there? What was at Waterhole then?
Oh, they had about, I'd say they must have had about 4 stores in there, and a hotel, and a shoemaker, and a livery barn, and yeah, I got pictures of the place, you know.
Did they have a hospital there too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Didn't have many rooms in it, but they had a hospital. They moved it up to Fairview when they moved, and hauled it up with horses too.
How big did a town have to get before they made sure there was an RCMP around there? Back in them days.
I don't know whether it was regulated by the population or I sure couldn't tell you. I know there was a cop at Waterhole when I was around there, and he was alone as far as I know. And one police is all they had in Fairview the biggest part of the time.
So the cop would have a pretty big district them days, huh? To travel with a horse.
Well, they was driving by the time I came up here.
Oh,
They was driving.
Well, in 27 was the first time you came to Waterhole.
Yeah,
What year did they move it then? Into Fairview?
28.
Was that right?
Following year in the fall. I landed the 11th of January in Waterhole in 27, and by the end of 28, Fairview was the town.
Did you say there used to be a reserve around Fairview?
Yeah, all that good land west and up north a ways. I don't know how many townships it would have been, maybe only one, but that's where the Indians was when I first came up.
Fairview was it on where it is now? Was that on reserve land at one time?
Well, now there's where you got me. It must have been because they had cabins within 200 yards or so out north up there. Sure, it had to be off there. They must have been on reserved land, I would say. That there avenue that goes right south must have been the south depth of reserve. And yeah, I'm sure. But how come they moved the town? They must have made it after they knew there was a deal going through where the Indians was moving. I guess that had to be the reason. Because they moved them up there and they built them. I can remember they was hammering away building new houses for them guys up there north of where Larsbach's servants on the reserve land there north of where Bella used to live and where K's are now.
So they traded them that land.
Yeah, these guys wanted to move, get closer to more wildlife. and they get away from settlement more, and so they, I don't know whether they gave them any difference or not, but not long ago I was reading some article about that. I think it's that their book that was made up, that this woman that left the country again with the Gutsman. It wrote about wars leading.
Oh, I don't know which one that would be. It's a history.
That woman that her husband was great friends with David and Shirley, and they come
Okay.
from High River.
Yeah, okay, I know them. Yeah.
Anyway, I think it's in her book. But anyway, that's beside the question. Yeah, them guys up there, they all got moved up there, and they was close to old Bill Bassnett. He was making moonshine all the time, you know. And there used to be some great old drunks going on up there. They was farthest from the cops and poor roads in there, and more to their liking. But they used to go back and build a whole slew of cabins together at the Battle or someplace, and they'd all move there, and they'd trap out every direction from there, and the next winter they'd probably be in a different part of the country. And there's places up there, while I was trapping up there, that there's old Indian cabins in about 3 different places, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And there still remains of some of them there close to where Clark Henry was on the White Month. Yeah.
So what year then did the steel come to Fairview? The railroad?
The railroad came in 1928, the same time that the town was moving. The end of the
It came in from Beach River.
Whitelaw. Whitelaw was the end of it. When I came up here, only I went in on the other side of the river. Yeah, Whitelaw was the end, and Jimmy Chalmers and anybody that was hauling stuff, they was trucking from Whitelaw to Waterhole too, you know.
Oh, then when did it come on to Hines Creek then?
1930. Wasn't very, just 1 year between. They got Fairview in 28, and in 30 they come here.
Did you say you worked on helping build a grade coming into Hines Creek? The steel, the railroad grade?
No,
And they did that with freight
I
horses?
did it all with horses. Down there where they crossed the Hay Lake, what's that leakage, you see that leakage, there's a narrow place. There's a good sized little lake on the west side. But that narrow place there, they shoved all the dirt out there with horses, you know, with a plunger, a thing on wheels and a big old dozer on the front of it, and they'd go around and get a goblin, and they kept shoving it out there until they got to where they could drive across with horses, and then they kept packing her down and widening it out. And that's the railroad grade today. Every bit of it.
Early bulldozer, huh? Wow.
There was 2 contractors move up here from outside that took on the work, and then there were some local guys. Oh, Herb Lund worked on some of that too, you know. But there's names of those contractors I just can't remember. One had a big camp down there where Kemp's place was.
So what year did you take on your homestead?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, I've trapped for quite a long time before I was interested in a piece of land, and it was in, what year was it, 1944? Yeah, 44.
So we had a trap line for a long time before that, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, I came up and was living there. I worked for Joe Large quite a little, and I was living just north of Joe's there. And from 1931 I moved up. Yeah.
Yeah. You got a trap line the next year?
No, I didn't own one for a long time. I just trapped hunt squirrels and trapped weasels along the clear hill there for a while.
So you had landed in the Eureka River country about the time that the times got hard.
Oh, sure, it was tough. Well, I saw hard times down there when I was at Bowden, way back in 1920. Let's see, 21 and 20. The railroad was loaded with hobos, and people were coming up, and the police was busy trying to keep them out of Calgary and Edmonton and Medicine Hat and places. They was, jails was full, I guess, and they trying to get charity outfits to feed some of them and soup kitchens going. And one time things were so desperate that a bunch of guys ganged up, and there must have been some leaders among them, the hard talkers, you know, and they was going to go to clear down to Ottawa. They was going to confiscate a train and make it haul them all the way down there. And it was a freight, I guess. But the cops phoned ahead and they took them all off of there at Winnipeg. They wouldn't dare let them go any farther than Winnipeg. There'd have been a mutiny or something. That's once they thought they was going to go places and accomplish something.
So before the 30 Depression come along, it wasn't all that good, huh? Really?
You see, it was getting tough. There was a few good years. 1927 was a good year. I thrashed south of Waterhole. That's the first fall I was up here. And they was paying $5 a day. We thought that was good wages. I don't know what they're charging for thrashing, 12 cents a bushel for wheat or something like that, I guess.
And how much was wheat bringing?
I don't know. I sure wouldn't want to guess at it because I never paid much attention to the markets.
What year was that you brushed all winter for a heifer?
That was around Bowden.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was with a married man. Him and I had went out and homesteaded. He went along. We picked our homesteads, and him and I went to Calgary together and filed on them. And he was a painter by trade. He was from Ontario. He had 3 kiddies. And hard up, he was living in a place he was paying rent on just out of town. So him and I was each gonna work for a heifer that winter. He figured he could afford to work and survive on. I don't know what else he had to depend on, but anyway, we started to work together for a guy that had no money either. And he made us a deal to board us for a certain length of time with these contracts. Well, the other guy, he had more problems than I did. He had to put his wife in the hospital in Olds for a while. He had an additional family, and he gave up. He let what work he had done, he let it go. And I kept on slugging away, and the snow kept getting deeper, and I was doing very little headway, and I'd get behind, I think I told you, and I'd work for my board once in a while for that same guy. There was a young kid from Summerland, BC, was working for him for $8 a month. Now that's not very high wages.
No.
And him and I was sleeping together, and bunking together, and being together all the time, Miss Frank. And every little while I'd stop and help them saw wood, or haul some off a bush or something, and he allowed it so much. And kept on working along. The last part of the winter, I wasn't trying to do anything for myself at all. The snow was too deep to be brush, and you couldn't cut brush close to the ground and cold. So I took off. Before spring, I went home for a little while. I remember riding across the country, but the snow was going. Then I come back, and there was a guy had to come over one day and propositioned me to work for him for seed for 2 months. He's a neighbor that got to know me. So okay, I promised him I would, and I did. I come back and worked for him for 2 months, and that was going to be my grub stake for going homestead.
Oh.
Yeah.
But that guy was selling wood that you were staying with?
Yeah, I selling wood in Innisfail
Selling firewood.
and Bowden and different places, and paying that kid $8 a month for helping him.
Where did you sell your heifer at?
Oh, there was an old German guy down right just out of Bowden, and he had some money. Very few people did, but I know, and he was going to give me $17. One time I thought, but he gave me 16. I couldn't get in the spring for a nice little heifer.
For your winter's work. That represented the winter's work.
Yeah, that's what I had to show for my winter. Oh, talk about times. Boy, oh boy. Some of these old folks in here can tell you about hard
I
times.
bet they can, yeah.
They can tell you
I
about
bet
hard
they can't remember as good as you can though, some things.
So there wasn't been a very good trail up to Eureka when you came, eh?
No, there was just that one old trail that went right by Walker's and angling across. There was no road logs. And old Tom Walker was living right there where young Tom, or where the doctor's living now, you know, that guy.
Mm-hmm.
And old Tom had built about 3 little cabins along there. I don't know why. He always used to laugh about it. He said if one got on fire, he just grabbed his hat and went to the next one. And he had an old fellow from down southern Alberta with him all those years, even while Mrs. Walker was alive. They got along good. And the kids were raised there, and they used to have a stopping place. Quite a few guys stopped at Walker's. It's a long ways to Ben's, you know, in any direction. Put up a lot of them.
Was that the Fort St. John Trail?
Yeah.
Oh, that'd been it, huh?
Yeah, it went right, angling across there and went just west of Ben's homestead, where Ben's store and everything was. Right, missed that. Of course, there was nothing there then, and it missed it and went a little bit west, I guess. Yeah, it was. It'd be a little west. It goes across there, just about where Bert Mitchell used to live.
Oh, yeah.
North of them, up there, and then right on. There was a guy who lived west of Ben's there. A bachelor had taken a homestead there, an old fellow, and he batched there for a while. And then there was a guy by the name of McIver, still McCarter. He took that place over and he trapped. He was a single guy. He used to live around Ben's quite a bit, and he got started trapping, and then the bush got the best of him, and he went bugs one spring, and he didn't come out, and everybody wondered what part of the country they should start hunting him for him. And way after the grass started to green up and everything, why, he found his way out.
Well,
And he had lost some beavers, I guess, some pelts that he had, but he had a couple with him yet. And when he come up, Ben knew he was gone wacky. And Ben I didn't see McCarthy. I didn't happen to be, I was on foot and good enough there by Larfax, but I didn't. But first time I saw Ben, I was asking him about McCarthy. Well, he got the cop to come up and take him, I think, down, and they arranged and sent him out to some. He eventually went back to Saskatchewan, and the last reports was he was sound in his mind again. He got bushed and he went crazy, you know, just for the temporarily. But Ben said he got down right in the middle of the road there and was looking up at him and praying and talking foolish, you know. And there wasn't any. Ben says, you know, when a guy starts that, it's something wrong.
What about, Dick, you told me one time about a Negro guy that ended up in a bush and then he froze to death.
Oh, yeah. Yes, there was a good write-up in that in some of the books yet. And that took place up in the Deer Hill country. That's more Deer Hill, where Alan and Becky lived up there somewhere. There was a guy had quite a shop line up there, and I can't recall his name right off the bat, but he had a cabin, and it was cold that winter. It was a terrible severe winter, and he was up there, this fellow, and he had a little German, or a little fox terrier dog. And he had one of them cabins built with a fireplace and no door on, but a big tarp hanging over the door, you know. And his bed off to one end. And he said in the night, why, that little dog jumped up and something startled him and he's just going to go mad. He was just barking and threatening and, you know, he's going to eat something up. And he wasn't used to having any disturbance. Nobody traveled by his cabin or nothing, just his own trail. And then the cabin, or the tarp flipped over, and he said there was the tallest man he ever saw come walking in, and he knew that he was froze solid, I guess, by the way he clumped.
Really? And
he walked right into the coals in that fireplace. There was no flames, but there was a pretty big bed. And, well, here he is, he's got a 25-20 leaning up against his bed there. And this guy was dressed with a kind of a helmet on, it looked like, and he didn't have an overcoat or a parkie, but he had some kind of a suit. Well, this guy, he didn't know what to make him, of course, but on the start he had a little thinking to do. But that guy said, it's awful cold, he says. Those poor little rabbits are going to freeze to death out there. And, well, this guy, he got up then and he says, well, I'll make you a better fire. And he started. And it seemed this guy claimed he come from Whitelaw. And he said, Mandy is up at where name in Alaska. He was going. He was on his way. Mandy was up there. And the name I could think of ordinarily too. And this was a Negro fellow, black as coal.
Well.
Well, this guy, he got him a while over there and told him, he says, you're pretty bad shape. And he's talking to him while he was making a quick little flame of kindling wood himself. And he knew he had a crazy man on his hands, all right, but he didn't know whether it was because he was froze or why. But he kept him around there, and of course he didn't go to bed anymore. And that guy said he was on his way to Nome, I think it was.
Yeah.
He says, Mandy is singing up at Nome, and he says he's got to get up there. And so then this guy thought, well, now he's got to do some thinking. He's got to get out. It's a long ways to Fairview, and this guy was determined he was going to go again in the morning, and he went out in the morning for a little while, as I remember, and he came in and he said the rabbits are freezing to death out there. He said something again about that, and so this guy made up a lunch for him and give him some directions. This guy insisted on keeping his directions, but this guy tried to get him mixed up. He was going to get him to start going back in the settlement and give him time to get to Fairview and get the cop.
Yeah.
That's what, as I heard. I didn't get it direct from that guy, but I knew of that guy already. So, I think that jigger, he must have started out and he just went a little ways and he come back again before that guy had a chance to get his mucklocks on and get away. But he took off again. And he beat it then, and he went down to a guy that had a toboggan and a horse, and he went there and he got him to, and they wheeled her down to the cops. It must have been Walker. I think it was Curly Walker was the cop, and he listened to him and sized things up and looked at the map a little bit, and he said, well, he told his wife to make a list of the outfit of clothing that they needed. He outfitted them with good warm parkies and lots of warm footing and big footwear and everything. And they were supposed to get back there as quick as they could. And when they did get back there, why, they followed that guy. They found where he had started out on one of the trails and left off. Just the one track ahead. So they took him after him. And they come to a place where he had made fire, made it to a jack pine pitchy stump, and had made fire there. And then from there they could tell he was a lost man because he was wandering. And they followed him, and he ended up at another cabin of this same guy's, a day's journey, just about. And here it was a cabin that hadn't had any door on it. That guy had tarps over like all these cabins. That guy was laying with his feet in the fireplace and his head on the sill of the bottom log across the doorway.
Oh.
And his hips was off the ground about
Oh, boy.
7 or 8 inches, and he was froze solid. And Dr. McFadgen, when they brought the body in and they talked it over and had the kind of an inquest over it, and what the doctor said that he probably was laying on the floor when he froze, but frost would contract and lift that body that much. He was froze solid.
Yeah.
But this first guy that I saw him, he said he had a helmet on, exactly like the boys wore in South Africa, in the South African War, and that was at the turn of the century, you know.
Yeah.
And he didn't have any warm underwear or nothing, but cheap little old suit.
Oh,
And he,
goodness.
but in the morning he took a walk. Yeah, I remember. I skipped that part. And he was gone long enough, and when he come back, he said he killed 10 men in Whitelaw.
Oh,
Yeah, that was one of the statements he made.
well.
Talk about
Did they ever know where he came from, really?
Nobody. There was some fella in Edmonton that had a colored man working for him for a while, and the description he said suited, it could have been him, but he never knew what become of him.
Well, that would have been in the early 1900s, eh?
No, this wasn't so darn long ago. It was during the Depression.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes. Sure, I was living up at Larsbeck's.
Well,
If Ben Baston was alive, he could have told you a lot about it because the Valley ones knew about it. Walter Lewis and a lot of them was in closer contact. They knew.
what, you told me you worked on the road along by Eureka somewhere. You helped building that road
Yeah.
with horses there.
Yes, I sure did. They started in, the fellow by the name of Floyd Kresge I got the contract. And we started up there by where Nels Melby used to live. And worked south down to the corner and then past Ben's, up towards past Portsmouth, a mile north of my homestead there. So I worked on there for quite a while that summer. They'd only let you make a few dollars though and then lay you off and give somebody else a chance. All the Valley bunch, I shouldn't be so critical as I am, but practically all of them was on welfare. And a bunch of them, when they came there to work, they was getting, what's the wage? It's 35 cents an hour. Yeah. And then they found out they was working out half relief and half cash. That's the way they went. And then there was a few other guys from Ward and so on that came on. And I was working for straight cash. I'd never got a dollar. And they can get welfare for years. I was paddling my own canoe and house, surviving and getting by. I didn't know any. And they was only charging 90 cents a day, Jerry, for board, and you could eat all you bloody well wanted to, 3 times a day.
But that represented 3 hours of work.
Yes, just about.
3 hours of work for a meal.
Yeah, all but 15 cents.
Yeah.
You'd make $1.05 in 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd only let you work an 8-hour day. That's another thing. No 10-hour days. I was working with old Roy Pat, and him and I was plowing the sods on the side for the slips and presidents to put her on the grades, you know. I was driving the team, and old Roy was hand putting the plow, and we'd get no trouble keeping ahead of him, you know. And we see the boss coming down the road sometimes. Well, it's crazy, the camp was quite a little ways up the road. He'd come walking down there about every second day or so to see how the head bushes was doing. Old Roy used to always tell me, go easy, we got to keep a couple of furs to be plowing on when he comes along.
Don't get too far ahead, huh?
Yeah, we didn't want to be idle with all caught up,
Yeah.
you know. They looked like we had too soft a show.
So was he Tommy's dad?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Tommy and Clifford. And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Where did you meet Oregon Jack?
I met him the fall of 1927 at Waterhole.
Oh.
The first fall I came up.
Well, we got to know a little bit about Oregon Jack.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
he was stuking. He's living with old Lucy, and he had her cooking. And there was 2 or 3 other girls around there too, and they was living in a bachelor's house down there. Pretty big farmer. And there's 2 brothers, and Jack was stuking. And me and this kid that I come from Grand Prairie with, Ernie, and we looking for a job. Somebody said, go out and see Lars Boseness. And so we went out there, and sure, we got a job stuking, and we found out what he was paying by the acre. And so there we was. I think we was working by the acre, but I can't remember, but I know we was working with, and we was going back and forth with Jack. That's where I first met him. He was stuking, and there was Cecil McLaughlin was another guy, that was working there, and he was boarding with old Jack and Lucy. They was boarding him. But me and my pal, we put up my tent and was cooking for ourselves. That's where, and got acquainted with old Jack. And I got a kick out of him right from the start. And the more longer I knew him, why, it's more noticeable.
So that was the beginning of a pretty long friendship, eh?
Yeah, I didn't see much of him then after that for quite a while. But when I moved up to Larsbach's there, I don't think I see him there. Only maybe a couple of times when he was coming down the trail to Ben's with pack horse or something. But when I went to the bush, I went trapping with old Jack. That was the fall of 34, I guess.
Was he a pretty good trapper?
Well, he'd been trapping a long time, but there was other guys that was a little more particular and that hadn't trapped any longer that were making better catches, you know. Old Jack was a joker. There was guys that knew him real well, and they figured he was just a little too darn easy going and spent too much time visiting. And it turned out to be the truth, because he come down to Ben's there after Ben got set up pretty good down on the highway after I had worked on the road with him. And there was a restaurant there, and Roy Patton was running it too. And old Jack come down there, and John Swede had a bunkhouse right between the restaurant and Ben's store, and there was quite a few guys hanging around there, of course, and usually a bottle. And old Jack, he came down there, and right in the middle of the trapping season, and he got to reading Western magazines and partying with the boys and visiting. And he pretty near screamed before he ever thought about going back to trap life. And I was up in a cabin in the spruce up there. I had built different cabins up there, and I had somebody and I was up there, and he come along and camped overnight on his way going, and he said, "Oh," I said, "oh, I'll have to do better next winter," he says. "I stayed around Patton's too long this winter." He always had an excuse.
Was he the guy that was going to cut that cabin in half with another fellow?
Sure, with old George Range. Oh, yeah. You see, when Florence and I built a cabin at the Battle up there, why, old George Raines had a cabin quite a ways west, and he used to come down there sometimes and go back. It wasn't far, and he moved as slow as molasses in January, you know. But then when we built a cabin, I started that the spring of 35, I guess it was. I didn't finish it, but I started, had it pretty well along, and was going to go back up in the fall. And during the summer, why, old Jack got with George Raines. They was the only two in the bush during the summer. And they figured when Florence and I was going to live down there, where if they bought to build a cabin close, well, we would have just a neighbor, you know, be closer together. So old Percy Williams, he was another guy that took a trip up in the bush. I think he packed a load of grub in for somebody. He got prosperous that spring, and he bought a couple of pack horses and a saddle horse. Old Percy did. He never had it before. And he packed one up, and he visited. And here was Jack and old George Raines building a new cabin, and not very far from where Florence and I was. not very far. And so Percy come down and was telling me all about that at the same time while I was working on the road, I think, about the same time. And anyway, oh yeah, he says, yeah, they're building a mansion up there. And I suppose old Jack would be telling him all about how they do the village, you know. So, well, they built it, got it finished, and they had it floored with jack pine. And by the time we got up there, I went ahead and finished the cabin that I had started and got the roof on it, and even built a back little shed on it. And they were on there quite a bit, but they didn't help me any, and I was pretty busy. And the next thing I knew, why, they wasn't getting along very good. They was, seemed like Jack was planning on getting Alice to move up there. John Gray's wife. You know.
Oh, not Lily.
No,
It
not
was
Lily.
Alice,
It was,
yeah.
he had been living with her part-time anyway in the summer, and John was over at Manning, you know.
Oh.
Old John Gray used to do that if he got really tough at home and he had no way of seeing how he's going to live. He'd just walk off, go and stay with his folks for a while, and somebody else would look after Alice while he was gone. Jack did that. Time and time again. And I guess he got thinking that he was going to deal old George out of his share of that cabin, and he was going to have a cook up there. Well, George, he didn't see it that way. He was older than Jack quite a bit, and it was getting close to fall, and he had worked hard working on cabin for a shelter for the winter. And he said he wasn't he hadn't offered it for sale, and he wasn't looking for anybody to buy it. And old Jack had made the declaration one day. He says, "You either got to buy me out or I'm going to buy you out." Well, George says, "Jack, I haven't got the money to buy you out, and my half isn't for sale." And so from there on, like, it wasn't very long till old Jack came down and sat on our porch for the day. He thought he'd moved back to Old Airplane. An old airplane had been a whole cluster of buildings at one time. That's where that there boy from St. John that was trucking, hauling oil, and I told him where his grandmother's grave is.
Yeah.
They said that airplane up there.
Yeah.
And it's been there ever since the flute time, 1918, I guess.
That's right.
Yeah. But anyway, the next thing we knew, Jack pulled out, he packed out. First he was going to saw that cabin straight down both ends, and he was going to build his part onto his half. Well, George said, "You can take your half without disturbing my half." Why, go ahead, Jack, but I don't want my half disturbed. Well, that stopped Jack. So the next thing he comes over telling us that he's going to move back over into Airplane, the old cabin that could be fixed up. And so he did. It ended their partnership.
But he didn't get Alice after all.
No, oh boy, there was one fall there that he thought sure he was going to have her up on the doig up there. He was even telling Ben about it. He says he owed Ben some money and he couldn't pay up all his bills, but he was talking to him for credit, I guess, trying to find out how much of a boostage he could get, you know. And Ben told me that guy, he says he never developed the brains of a 2-year-old. He says he thinks he could have taken her way up there and she's useless as tits on a boar. That's Ben's expression.
Jack, he was the guy that was going to kill a bear with some 22 shells one time too, huh? handful of Super X.
Oh, yeah, with Ernie and him, yeah. They went in the spring of the year. Well, Ernie was new to the country. He had made a couple of pretty good catches there on his trap line. He bought it from Gaucher's. So Jack was a great cat, always planning some big expedition if he could get somebody that didn't know any better to go along. So he was telling them they'll take off on the snow with some old toboggans, you know, that they could discard. And they gotta go way up to Wamp Lake. That's a long ways up past the Hay River trading post on the Tatogga there. And they was going way up there and bound to be beaver up there. So Ernie thought, sure, that would be a good chance to see some country, and they go along. And they, there was other guys up there that had all the beaver cleaned out, of course, before, and they didn't know. They was up there and camped out, and they walked 200 or 300 miles, I guess, for nothing. But they was going along a big, kind of a flat piece of land there with a small little muskeg lake in it. And according to Jack and Ernie, there was a bear that come out up on just on the brow of the hill against the skylight, and it was a big one. Ernie admitted it was a whopper. But the way Jack told it, why he was telling me, he said him and Ernie was walking along there, and they'd been looking for beaver sign and cutting, you know, to see if any beaver had been peeling any sticks or cutting. And he said they stopped for a smoke, and he turned his head, and he said, so help me God, there was a bear as big as a boxcar up there. and he says, Ernie was going to shoot. He says, I said, stop, hold it. No, he says, I didn't have too much confidence in him. But he says, I dove in my pocket and come up with a ham of Super X.
With this big bear.
Yeah. Yeah, Super X 22 shell. He says, I dove down for a handful of Super X. Oh boy, that used to tickle a guy I had up in the bush.
How many years did you trap all together?
Me?
Yeah. How many years did you trap?
Oh, well, I never kept track of it, Jerry, because I pretty well quit in between this time. But from the time I first started to depend on winter time to make a few dollars, that was in 1931, and up till I quit for good. Well, you know yourself, you was up there at the battle, you kids that time, and I sold the line right shortly after that. I still owned it that fall when we had, but see, the next spring must have been my last. I don't know. Maybe you remember me having Keith up there with me once, and then I had Jimmy up the next year, and then I had Hans up the last year. So that run into.
But what year would that have been when Dave was up? Armstrong was up there too, eh?
You guys was up there.
I don't know what year that would have been.
70, maybe 70.
Yeah, it might have been about there.
Yeah.
I bought that trap line from Johnny Knott in 69, the spring of 69. And I had it for 5 years. I trapped beaver 5 springs.
Oh, yeah.
Mom was up there with me several times.
Yeah.
So there wasn't many years out of there that you didn't trap then either, was there? There wouldn't be many years that you didn't trap.
No, not too many. No, not a heck of a lot of them. I know that 1944 was 1 year I didn't trap till after Christmas, because that's the year Kenny was born.
Yeah, he would have been born in
In
November.
Yeah. Yeah, he was born in November, and I didn't dare be home then.
Was that the year you bought your homestead? You bought it, huh?
We was living on it then. Yeah, I bought it the year before.
How much did you pay for it?
That same summer.
How
I
much?
paid, it cost me $515 with some taxes, $450 and $65 taxes.
For a half section,
No, a quarter,
a quarter.
just a quarter. Yeah.
Was there some kind of a house on it then?
Oh, yeah, there was a guy that had lived in it, had a cook, and they lived in it. It was a warm little place, small.
So what was the guy's name that had it? Was that Piper? Or Parker?
Parker.
Parker?
Yeah, I don't know what his first name was, but
Mm-hmm.
I did know, but Parker was his name.
Yeah.
What time do you have to go to supper, Dick?
Oh,
20 to 5, isn't that what time
yeah,
you
20 to 5, an hour,
go? We got,
almost an hour yet.
oh yeah.
Well, Dick, I'd like to hear you tell us a little bit about why you become a believer in the Lord and when.
All right.
Well, that's been a pretty important part of your life since I've known you.
Yeah, I sure was I can remember as clear as can be when I was strictly an unbeliever. And that's a long time back, but not so far as compared with a lifetime. No, even when Florence was baptized with the Holy Ghost, and she really accepted the Lord in every way, and put lots of faith and trust in Him. I wasn't going along with her. I used to attend services and take part in the song service, but you know, I wasn't looking for anything any more than just appearance. Glenn Murphy had a lot to do with changing me. He had a lot to do, and so did Chester. But it was a slow process. It was a slow process. I didn't ever run into anything where I got hysterical and claimed I got it all in one moment or something. It was I think that Florence's passing was more from there on that I really began to believe that there was an almighty God that was in full control of everything, and that we had to look to Him for safety and forgiveness. I haven't written my Bible a great deal up till that time, and then when I started to read my Bible more and make notes and study on it, and then another thing, when I began to hear and see stuff that was published by agnostics and other guys, that had a lot to do with it too. That caused me to stop and really consider how wrong and how long I had wasted my life in complete darkness. I wasn't prepared if anything would happen to me. And I see they was been out all night, and they wasn't polished, sleepy guys at all, and one was Berg, the guy that's got the land up there.
Alan?
Alan,
Yeah.
And he had another little guy with him, and his dad had sent them over to get the Bean Boys to make a full crew. They was just getting started. And I was at Ben's, and these guys come, were strangers to me, and they said, how do you find your way down to Beans? I said, you mean Ernie Beans? Yeah. Well, I told them, you're out of your way a little bit coming here. You should stop third bell lines. I give them the directions. And so they went over and they went and they hired the Bean Boys. And I never expected to see Alan again or any of them. But Bean went over there, and then when they came home after New Year's, why they was short-handed or something. They was going to finish up, and they wanted Manny to go back with them. And well, Mom and I agreed that he might as well. He wanted to go, and they had room for him, so they was all going to go back together. And I only had $20 between me and starvation, and I give it to Manny, 2 tens, you know, and I said, you maybe need these. And I never thought of it at all, never begrudged it to him or anything. We hated to see him go, but it wasn't going to be for long, I thought. And so he was over there with them, and then we never heard from him. Of course, he hadn't been there long enough.
No.
And then I was hauling straw from Bill Barr's backs, from a straw stack over there, and I come along and stopped there where one of the, who told me now? One of the Bean kids must have been home, it seems to me. Oh, it was Portsmouth kid, I guess. Anyway, I stopped there for something and by the yard, got off of this load of straw and walked over there. And this guy says, Bobby got killed. I said, Bob McAllister? He says, no, Bobby Dixon. And Florence was downtown at the time. She'd gone to town that day for some necessary thing. And here was you and Joyce was at home.
I know I was, for sure.
He was the two.
Yeah. Yeah, Joyce.
And I remember when I come home and told you 2 girls about it.
Yeah, that was pretty tough. Boy, boy.
And I wouldn't take what I'm going to tell you next. I don't think I should anyway. But
Dick, that's okay. That's going to be me in Rosie's pocket.
Yeah.
the very guy that you've got a lot of confidence in, and he's quite an entertainer. And I had never met him until we went over there. We had to get, Ben was a lifesaver to me that time.
Yeah.
It was on a Saturday, and I think that I went back home up because Ben had a phone. Maybe it was Friday night. Now there may have been a Saturday that elapsed between, but I know I was at Ben's Saturday night, and I'd been up there to and oh yeah, Beatrice Bassnett was in there. She used to do quite a bit of phoning for people and answer. And I got her to put a call in, and I know the RCMP want us to be over there Monday morning. And well, I I stood about as much chance of getting there Monday morning as I would have flying over the moon. But Ben, he answered out and said he'd take this. So we come up to Ben's. We must have walked up there early in the morning, I guess. No, one of the kids drove us up in the team and sleigh. And Hank Gray was going to stay with you, you kids, while we was gone. That's it. You remember that? Hank drove us up there. So Ben and us took off. We got going, and there had been a lot of the outfits moving out of the bush. Some big, heavy equipment, and there had been places where the snow was gone. They were picking up mud, and they were dropping off big old hunks of mud, you know, that froze like concrete. And we started off, and we have to move some of them, get just about out of the way. Billy Larsbeck went along with Ben and us. There's four of us. And I know Ben was having quite a time to dodge some of them. He didn't dare the high center. And we made it, and it was getting soft and worse. And so we made it up to the hill on this side of the clear. And Harry Marshall was living there. And we walked in there the last little ways and stayed there with Harry. We figured he'd wait till it froze a little, trying to continue on. And you can imagine the state of mind we was in.
Yeah, for sure.
So we took off in the evening again, and we met another cavalcade way down, I don't know how far past the clear, into BC a little ways. There used to be some people have a sawmill on the north side of the road. You probably know the names, Jerry. And I don't know how come we stopped there, or why, for some reason or other, but to inquire. We went on, kept on going, and then turned south. And it was hard on a car. Ben put that car through some terrible going, and there was times that he just gripped that old steering wheel and all the muscle and strength he had, you know. And we stopped at the first mill on the east side of the road, way down. We didn't know, we hadn't got any directions from anybody. And we drove in, and I walked into a place because I knew there was a smoke coming out of a bunkhouse there. And I rapped on the door, and a guy hollered, "Just a minute," and he let me in. And then I was inquiring for the mill, and all he wanted to do was tell. He had it in for Chauncey Burt, this guy. He was one of them there guys that had some grudge or something, and he started to tell me. He said, "Sue that son of a bitch for all you can get." You know, he knew about the accident in there when he found out I was the father. And I didn't listen to him any more than just, I said, "How many mills is there along the road do we pass?" And I found that out. I walked over there and out to where Ben and Mom and Bill was waiting. And we went on. We got pulled in there way in the night sometime. The boys, we knocked on the bunkhouse door, and Jackie or Bob, one of them, got up and put on some lights and built up a fire. And then they took us over and made us acquainted with Mrs. Chauncey. And they had their son-in-law and daughter. Their son-in-law was the sawyer that when it happened, you know. And he had the diarrhea that morning. They had They had 8 logs left on the ramp, and they was gonna, it was Friday, and they was gonna finish, and the boys was all gonna come home on Friday morning. And he had to shut her down and run to the toilet, and he told them so. And these logs, Alan and the man, he rolled them down, ready for the canter. And then they laid their gloves on one of them logs, I guess. But when the guy left the mill, he left the cat idling, and it's a double universal joint, 29 inches apart between the power, and it was idling. And Manny got hung up on them. Tore all his, he had a brand new pair of high top laced rubbers, you know, and laced up tight, and he just tore them off his feet. When he got caught, he threw him hard and tore his clothes right off.
Boy.
Left one rubber on, but he's to pants like this. And them boys had no business to be going over that for anything at all. They had the last logs was on the ramps, and everybody else was going to have a smoke. And Mrs. Bird told me that them two couldn't keep their hands off each other. They'd been wrestling. They were so well matched. Manny and him, and they was wrestling every spare minute that they had prison. They were always grabbing each other and jostling each other.
So did you have to go on to Dawson Creek, or did the police meet you out there?
You know, we had to go to Dawson Creek, and Chancey took us over there, Mrs. Bird and Chauncey. Yeah, we camped the rest of the night in where their daughter and their son-in-law, they was away because their baby was sick, and they had just happened they wasn't there, so they put us right in their little sleeping quarters there. And the next morning, the rest of the crew was all, there wasn't going to be any work done, but they was all there, and there was some from down Cherry Point way. Mom and I didn't go in and eat breakfast with them. We walked down to go and have a look at the mill. And, we walked past the bunkhouse. Mrs. Chancey Brew, she told us afterwards, when we walked by there, Jackie Bean says, "They're going down to look at Berg's man trap." That sounded like Jackie Bean, all right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So did Ben stay, or did he go back home then?
Yeah, Ben and Bill, they went back. And they took us over to Dawson there when they got squared around, and Chancey got us a room. They had the room in the hotel. And so we went down and got acquainted with the undertaker. He took us down there to meet him. Next morning we was at or that afternoon I mean, the hearing, which was 1 o'clock I think. They had 2 different sessions while we was there. And there was something that they wasn't satisfied with, and the guy that run a music store, he had been an old coroner, and he told us that he had 20 years experience with police work, he told us. And we went in and told him something that hadn't been brought up, and he phoned the RCMP, He said that we drew his attention to something that he wanted to, he couldn't make it more light.
Yeah, a little
So-
more later.
When we left, they was gonna have another coroner's inquest, but we didn't stay for it. We caught a train, and when we came home by train, we had to go clear down to,
Grand Prairie?
no further than that, was way down
McLennan?
there to,
McLennan, was it down
Yeah,
that
McLennan.
far? Yeah.
yeah. You know, the train at Spirit River,
Again. Okay.
there's
Don't last long.
right across by the, we
Say it
had
again?
You had to wait till the train left Spirit River and backed all the way up again. So most of us got off, and some of us, I remember being in the barn, but having some beer. And seeing a lot of them coming and going out of there. And then they got on the train again when it come back. Yeah, we went on down to McLennan and had to stay overnight down there, and then had to, okay.
Now, how'd you get home then?
I know it was a ride.
Have to make up.
Last long.
Well, maybe Rose has got some questions she's been thinking about she'd like to hear your dad's answer.
Well, I've been just enjoying all the nice stories.
You know, though I was going to tell you
Last one.
something. That Mom noticed that when we was around the hotel there, that Alan would not, he avoided her as every chance he got, he wouldn't even look at her.
Yeah.
And she said it appeared like he tried to keep out of our way as much as possible. And she had a suspicion that she couldn't get rid of. And on account of Mrs. Bird telling us that them two boys couldn't keep their hands off each other, always tussling and wrestling and so on. I've always thought how easy it would be for them.
Yeah.
And so that's what they held that third coroner's inquest about, and we didn't stay for it.
So maybe he knows something that's never been told yet, eh? Could be.
Yeah, it could be.
Well, I can't help but think there's a possibility. I, in my mind, I don't blame him as though I saw him do it or anything like
Yeah.
that, but there's a
Yeah.
possibility.
Right.
Because Manny was no slouch, he wasn't clumsy, and why would he get hung up on a double when their gloves was over here and there was lots of room for him to be wrestling, you know? And Mom went to her grave believing that it was there
Yeah.
wasn't a witness to it. One man, all he had to do was keep still.
Yeah. Yeah, but someday the story will be told just the way it happened. And, it'd be bad if somebody, didn't come clean and say, it sure would have put your minds at ease, if that's really what happened.
Well, at the time, I suppose it would have, but all those years that's gone
Yeah.
by since, and we've lived it down, and there's been lots of other people that have lost a loved one in a worse way, you will say, where they,
Yeah. They've been murdered or kidnapped.
yeah,
That's worse.
went through a lot of grief for the
Yeah.
guy
A lot
with
of pain.
some sickness that was incurable and things. There's lots
Yeah.
of that. But he was just 18.
I don't think he was even 18.
I guess he would have on his birthday.
Yeah, in July.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He,
But Alan told me, you know, that he held him in his arms when he took his last breath. He was holding him. He really, you know, he felt bad about it. You know, if he did happen to...
Well, he was there. If he must have had his back turned if he didn't see what happened.
Well, that's what he claimed, right? That's what he said. He said he heard Manny say something, and he said he turned around and Manny his whatever he was saying was cut off, you know, and he said he turned around real quick and he was just flopping on that thing. That's what his story was. So, you know, maybe that's the way it was. You know, maybe. But anyway, Manny probably went to be with the Lord.
Another thing, you know, they found a little bit of change. I guess somebody had picked his clothes up before Mum and I was over there, I think. And there was a little bit of change there. And the cops had been over. When they phoned Bassnets on Saturday afternoon, they had already been over there, 2 of them. And they advised us to get over as quick as we could because they went through 18 inches of water on the river. They had a bridge made of ice across there, you see, and it was starting to run. And so Chauncey wasn't afraid to chance it. He knew it was safe to drive through. We splashed with some water all right going over, but the cops advised me to get over there as quick as possible. And, what was I?
About the change.
Oh yeah, about that change. And they seemed to make quite a bit of that. At the 2 inquests that I heard, well, they were sure asking Chauncey a lot of questions and hanging hard for their answers. And there was a fellow by the name of Bill Mallard from further down the river that was working there at the time, and he wasn't there. He'd gone home. And so the last inquest I heard, the second one, why they gave him strict orders to get every man in here at 11 o'clock on Monday morning, I think it was, or such. Well, no, couldn't be. Anyway, they give him a day and have them there for that next inquest. Every man that was at the mill at the time. And so when we went up to the room, Chauncey Burke says to me, he says, well, I can tell them who picked that change up if they want to know so damn bad. He says, I did. That's what the last time I saw Chauncey Burke. He hadn't told him, you see. He thought it wasn't. I don't know why he didn't, but they seemed to make a question of it and nobody answered. But he says, I can tell them that. He says, I did. Oh, I felt sorry for Chauncey.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, it'd be tough for him too, no doubt.
for sure it would be.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. Well, that's...
Well, Dick, you've seen a lot of things happen in your time, more than probably your generation, probably more than any generation in your lifetime, for the changes that you've seen taking place. What is it today that you would recommend for young couples to be able to make it work in marriage, to have successful and to raise a family successful?
I've thought of that same question since we saw Annabelle and that.
Right.
Great.
What advice could you give today for young couples?
Well, I don't think I doubt that you could get them to pay much attention to it. I would think it would be a kind of waste of time at first. But if you didn't ask me that, you said, what would I tell them? Or what would my advice be? I would think that they pretty near got to separate themselves from an awful lot of young people. But one of the main things, they just got to, and if they can find some true Christians, make sure and get in with them solid. And chum along with each other and encourage each other. But they certainly don't want to have nothing to do with the unbelievers and kids that are gone mad over what they watch on TV and going all sorts of crap like that. That's the worst. That's the ruination of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like it. It seems like it.
Didn't I tell you one time that I was going to give you the words of the devil's vision, and you didn't get it?
Yeah, I don't think I got it. No.
Well, I know you didn't find it, because if I can find it now, I'll just have it.
Okay, that'll be good, Dad. I'd be glad to have
I'll
it.
give it to you, and you can, it's worthwhile,
Okay.
if I can find it. To see you at what they call moochigans, you know. Odd times. I never was much for running to them dances. I missed more than I ever attended, but there used to be little sports.
What was a moochigan?
Huh?
What was a moochigan?
Oh, it just means a good time. That's about
Yeah.
what it is, you know. That's all, just a good time. And I used to see her. I had a picture of her, and I think I have yet, her and Flora, both standing outside of Ben's store, and Mom was thin-faced as could be, you know. You'd never recognize her.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've got that picture in my album, her and Flora. Not, that was Ben's sister-in-law.
Mm-hmm.
And of course I used to see the kids quite often. And, but I never courted her for any more than to be there for a few minutes. I went hunting with Phil a time or two and been there, stopped in there with old Oregon Jack a few times. And, but when her and I decided to go together, why, Jack and Alice was the four of us.
Oh, yeah.
We all went up to old Jack's homestead. Did I ever tell you about that?
No.
Yeah. And that was in 1934. And Jack had put in a garden that spring, or somebody had up there.
Mm-hmm.
And he was going up there. He didn't have a team and wagon, but Alice had. And they come along and picked me up. And they had Florence along. And we was going to... Did you ever know where old Charlie Taylor lived?
Charlie Taylor, yeah?
Yeah, well, we camped there because I helped Charlie Taylor get his logs up for his house.
Hmm.
And the shack was there, and we camped there. And then we went up to Jack's, and it was around there for 2 or 3 days because I know George Clare was up there and then visited with somebody across the creek, and George Clare and Lenny Chalmers had a whole bunch of pups. That's some of these reasons to get them big enough for sleigh dogs. And then I came back with them, and I know when they was going to go home, I got off 2 miles north of where Larsbacks lived, on that line straight through there that runs past Earl Wells.
Mm-hmm.
They was going to go that way home, and I got up and walked home after being up at Jack's place at that time. And well, then in the fall, yeah, I was up in the bush early in September in running season. I remember alone up there, and I came back, and Jack had missed me. He went around by Webster's. He thought he was going to meet me, but I came home a different way. And I remember I was over there, and Florence was living with her brother, and they was brushing for Ben's in a tent down there and camping out. And I was around with her quite a little bit that fall. Old Jack was still around with Alice because John Gray was still staying over at Manning. I remember that. That's it.
So did Florence spend the winter with you that winter?
After Christmas, she did.
Christmas.
Yeah. Yeah, it's after Christmas.
And you and her spent how many years together?
We went to the bush that winter. And then in the springs when I was back up there alone and building a cabin close to where old Jack and George Range was. And that would be, what did I say, 1935, spring of 35.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, no. No, it's, can't be right.
Manny was born in 36, right? I think
No, he
so.
was born in 1935 in July.
35, okay.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah,